Hello and welcome to Hot Pursuit, part of the Ahval News Online video and podcast series. Today, my guest is from Washington, D.C., Stephen Cook, a senior fellow with Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome, Stephen.
Hi, Yavuz. How's it going?
Fine, and we are going to discuss and evaluate and assess the latest situation just before the American elections, November
We are
3.
just a few days away.
Right. As we speak, this is October 31st, Saturday, and there is already a lot of question marks about how the outcome of the American elections, which are also in a way elections for Turkey, elections for many parts of the world per se.
Right.
American voters will basically vote about the future of the world, apart from the other ones. The main question mark now, sort of being more and more visible, coming from different parts of the pundits, think tanks, journalists, editors, etc., how the outcome, whatever it will be, will affect the damaged Turkish-American relations, how it will affect the alliance, how it will affect Turkey's relations with NATO, and particularly with the emphasis on current Erdogan-Trump relations.
Right.
According to our latest New York Times report, has become very, very visible in how exportation of disrespect for rule of law found its way into American soil. So,
That's right.
what are your takes? What is your assessment?
Well, look, obviously, if President Trump is reelected, we'll probably see a lot more of the same in U.S.-Turkey relations, where there is a debate, broadly speaking, in Washington about how to handle Turkey and Turkey's the changes to Turkey's foreign policy and obviously the deepening of authoritarianism and repression in Turkey. But of course, that debate is really a meaningless one because the President of the United States has demonstrated no real inclination to do anything about those issues. Instead, he has a personal fondness for President Erdogan, and so on kind of issues that are critical to the Turkish president, things like the Halkbank case or sanctions on Turkey for the purchase of the S-400 system. Those things, the president has slow-rolled the Halkbank case. It only went forward after President Trump was annoyed with President Erdogan over Syria, because President Trump was taking political heat over it here in the United States. S-400, the president has just ignored Congress's directive to apply sanctions on Turkey. I think overall, Turkey gets the attention from the president at very, very specific moments. But otherwise, the Turks have been able to kind of advance their interests wherever they are with very little pushback from the United States. You do see Secretary of State Mike Pompeo pushing the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, praising the relationship between the United States and Greece. And there has been a renewed emphasis on strategic relations with Greece. But without the kind of presidential kind of sponsorship of these things, it is something that is much more under the radar screen. So I think you'd see a lot more of what you see now under a second Trump presidency. With if former Vice President Biden were to win, I think you'd see...
Would that mean more emboldenment for Erdogan and his administration and his circle?
If Trump were to win, there would be more. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Emboldenment?
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, it's hard to imagine that they're emboldened any more than they are now. I mean, involved in Nagorno-Karabakh, in Syria, in Iraq, in Libya, in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Turkish foreign policy would be much more aggressive, much more offensive, much more assertive than it is.
It could be. Like I said, you would see a lot more, though. You'd see a lot more of what you're getting from Turkey and a similar kind of reaction from the United States, unless the Turks did something that was so egregious that it caught the attention of the president. But the president doesn't really have a strategy. His attention on issues is really episodic and how it helps him rather than a coherent view of American foreign policy. in the part of the world where Turkey is located. Now, getting back to former Vice President Biden, if you were to, I would expect some changes. There are
big changes or minor
changes to the American approach to Turkey. I think that one of the things that I think some of the things I should say that President Biden would want to emphasize very early on if he were elected: rule of law, and not being silent on what happens in the other countries, especially those who are our allies. And I think rule of law relates directly to the Halkbank case, as Vice President Biden indicated to President Erdogan when the vice president was the vice president and in Istanbul after the failed coup in 2016. He told President Erdogan that the United States, neither he nor President Obama, could interfere in the investigation into Halkbank. And then, of course, he's a longtime senator and a Senate institutionalist. And so I would imagine that the executive order drafted recommending sanctions on Turkey for the purchase of the S-400 would be signed, because the legislation specifically directs the president to apply sanctions. And so it strikes me that it would be important for a Biden administration to uphold the rule of law. Then there is going to be, I think, undoubtedly, a significant amount of pressure on a Biden administration to take tough stands on Americans' allies and their human rights records, whether that's in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Turkey, anywhere in the world. And in a place where the United States has a long list of problems with Turkish foreign policy and domestic policy, I think Turkey is ripe for one of those countries that, it's the president's powers are limited in this area, but I don't expect that President Biden, to be silent on these issues in the way that President Trump has been silent on these issues. President Trump advocated for the release of Pastor Andrew Brunson. He has never advocated for any Turks unfairly imprisoned just based on their political views, of which there are many, many, many of them.
There are very serious issues that's caused serious damage between Washington, D.C. and Ankara during in the past 5 or 6 years, maybe following, especially in the aftermath of the attempted coup. Things have gotten worse and worse. And part of the issues are, I think, pending. For example, some embassy staff are jailed, like Metin Topuz. Recently, another person, Can Türk, was also sentenced to long-term prison.
Right.
And these issues are there. And you have the issue of S-400s. I think let's just focus on S-400s. I think whoever wins November 3, the issue of testing of S-400s, confirmed by President Erdogan himself, will be the one that will never go away, and that will have some repercussions no matter what.
And S-400 really is a very big issue for the professional bureaucracy, for officials at the State Department, officials at the Department of Defense. The Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs said that Turkey was going to be facing sanctions as a result. I think there is a general agreement, although debates continue about our relationship with Turkey, but there's a general agreement that the S-400 in testing it stepped over a line and that sanctions are appropriate. The question is whether the President of the United States, whether a President Trump would be willing to sign that executive order that has been lying around the White House for 18 months on sanctions. The Treasury Department has already written the executive order recommending which sanctions would be appropriate, and the president has just refused to sign it. So the test of the S-400, rumors of its actual use have garnered significant attention at the State Department and the Pentagon, but thus far there hasn't been any action. I would suspect that in a Biden administration, after a policy review, there's going to be decisions made about about sanctions. And those decisions are going to be in part about Turkey's conduct. And the other part of it is about reestablishing the appropriate checks and balances in the American system. And that Vice President Biden, perhaps soon President Biden, having served for a long time in the Senate, wants to signal to the American people that he is rebalancing the powers and prerogatives of the branches of government, and that if the Congress directs the president to apply sanctions, that he will then do that. So there's two things that are really happening here. One, Turkey's provocative actions, and two, getting America's own house in order, which would affect Turkey and U.S.-Turkey relations.
Apart from the sort of very visible and to many very concerning situation of oppression at home in Turkey, approximately, according to Human Rights Watch, 50,000 political prisoners, including Selahattin Demirtas, co-chair of the pro-Kurdish HDP party, etc., etc., and also the completely destruction of the whatever was left of independent Turkish media and judiciary is basically an extension of the executive powers, etc. Apart from all of these, the most recently we have all observed more and more signs and moves of the Turkish foreign policy, regional policy, that some have defined as assertive, some see as sort of expansionist. And there are also voices being raised now that Turkey should have been seen as a rock state, failed state, or to rock state, and many of these things. But in the context of that, we have also seen and we have known that Erdogan put all his eggs in Trump's basket, because Trump is the only channel to Turkey's historic ally, United States. And the recent moves, including Southern Caucasus, Syria, Northern Cyprus, all these conflicts they're developing with Greece, Libya, all of these issues in a package. What do they tell us? Do they tell us, as some claim, Erdogan is basically preparing a ground for negotiations with whoever wins the American elections? How do you read them?
Well, I think it's clear that the relationship between Erdogan and Trump has been one that has been largely beneficial to President Erdogan. There have been moments, of course, the summer of 2018, in which the president threatened Erdogan over the continued confinement or jailing of Pastor Andrew Brunson. But by and large, the president has accepted President Erdogan's view of things. I think that what may be happening, and certainly if those in Ankara were paying attention, they should be thinking about how to negotiate with a new Biden administration. But what strikes me that's happening is that Turkey is doing what a number of other countries are also doing, which is creating facts on the ground that will be very difficult for a Biden administration to try to reverse. So Varosha or Famagusta, what's happening in Cyprus. Clearly Erdogan backed the new leader of the Turkish Cypriots, prosecuting the conflict against the PKK in the way that it has done that. Nagorno-Karabakh, Libya, all of these things strikes me as an effort for Turkey to advance its interests as far as it can go until there's an actual change in administration. So that if former Vice President Biden is elected a number of days from now, Turkey will have until mid-January to advance those interests, and one could expect them to be aggressive.
That will be a very delicate period, will it not? I mean, these 2.5 months, many are worried about how the behavioral patterns of leaders like Erdogan will be. I think
that there will be. I think Turkey will be interested in advancing its interests before President Biden were to take over, if he were to be elected, and that they would get no real argument from the Trump administration if they were to do that, making it, as I said, more difficult for a Biden administration to pursue American foreign policy if Turkey has established certain, as I said, facts on the ground in and around the country where it's been most active. That I think it's if I was sitting in the Turkish presidential palace and I was looking at the polls and I knew that I was likely to run into more difficulty with a new potential Democratic president, I would be doing something very, very similar to what Erdogan is doing. I think you see that in a variety of places. I don't think he's unique in that sense. But the problem is, if there is a new president, if there is a Biden administration, then there's likely to be more consequences as a result of this aggression, particularly if a lot of it happens in this transition period from the Trump administration to a Biden administration. Again, though, let me temper expectations among those who believe that a Democratic administration is going to come out swinging, as we say, and punish Turkey. There will be a policy review, and there was the debate about Turkey in Washington hasn't been settled. Yes, most people on Capitol Hill and many people in the think tank community like myself, and many people at the State Department and many people within the intelligence community and at the Pentagon have concluded that Turkey has become problematic and that Turkey is pursuing its interests with very little regard for the policies and interests of the United States. But that doesn't mean that there isn't an argument about what the United States can do to save the relationship, whether it's worth saving the relationship, or how to move into a new phase of the relationship. While that argument is going on, if a President Biden doesn't settle it himself, we're going to see different strands of thinking coming out of Washington on U.S.-Turkey relations.
I understand that you're tempering your cautiousness. Of course, we don't have any idea about the outcome of the elections yet. But yet, New York Times story, I think, among many things, makes one thing clear, that the story, as it chronologically snowballed into pushing, for corruption within the American judiciary, right, and institutions, etc. You see that all those figures like Preet Bharara or Berman, people like that, definitely felt bruised. They're humiliated because their values, which are part of the American foundational values, were questioned, were tried to be manipulated, etc., etc. So possibly, as opposed to what you're saying, one could also presume that there will be consequences in those terms. There are, for example, rumors that Preet Bharara would be elected perhaps as Attorney General. And those people will not be storming in the room, but they will try to correct things, I think, in their own honor.
Let me just go back to, pardon me one second. Let me go back to what I said at the very top of this conversation. I think that a President Biden, again, wanting to reinforce rule of law and signal to the American people in the world that rule of law prevails in the United States, would no longer hinder investigation and prosecution of Halkbank or people involved in Halkbank. I think that case will go forward, regardless of how Preet Bharara feels about it, no matter how Berman feels about it, regardless of whether Preet Bharara becomes the Attorney General or not, just on the basis of reinforcing and reestablishing the rule of law in this country, Halkbank is one of those cases that is primed to move forward as a result. I think of those former U.S. attorneys as people who may feel a certain way, but also have a deep and abiding commitment to upholding the rule of law. And that's why Halkbank would move forward, not necessarily because they've been trolled on Twitter by Turks or anything like that. So I think I think Turks can expect Halkbank will move forward. S-400, unless all of a sudden they pull it down and put it in a box and send it back to Moscow, I think there's going to be a Moscow. On these other issues, Eastern Mediterranean, Syria, Iraq, Nagorno-Karabakh, Libya, those things are going to be up for debate. Because those things are questions of judgment about how best to achieve American interests in the region, or whether it matters anymore, and the United States can reduce its presence in the region. Those other two things relating to rule of law, I expect them to go forward. On the other ones, like I said, I think it's open to debate.
I think it's more clear. Okay, let's end with the conclusive question, perhaps, to make things very clear for our viewers and listeners. There are now second thoughts, apparently, in Ankara that, all the eggs should not perhaps be put in Trump's basket. And now there are also signs.
It's a little late, don't you think?
Well, we should ask them.
Should have thought about that.
We should ask them. But some pundits and their backers are now pushing the idea, okay, we need a reset. And we are prepared for a reset. That's the message that's being conveyed now more and more clearly, because obviously there's a realization that Joe Biden might come out victorious. And then what? And then this is the idea that a reset or a blank page now, after all these things that happened, just, try to respond to that. Is it possible? A reset, blank page, tabula rasa?
I think I'm not sure that it's possible to have a blank page. And the question is, can there be a reset if both parties are going to have to want that reset? And the Turks are going to have to make some sort of concessions and moves to the United States. It's one thing to say in the Turkish press, there needs to be a reset. There's another thing to actually get to the table and say to the United States, okay, our bad. We're going to send 400 back. We're going to stop doing what we're doing in the Eastern Mediterranean, or any one of these things. But if Turkish pundits believe that there can be a reset by Americans sitting down with Turks and the Americans accepting the Turkish view of things, I think
Turkey's geopolitical importance and
I think that that's something that the Turks are going to have to prove to them. Now, that's not to say that there aren't people who might be sitting in positions of authority in a Biden administration who also want a reset and who also might be amenable to that idea. I would caution them, however, that I think that as much as the Turks may say that they want to reset, they're going to have to perform in the process of it. My own view is resets, blank, the two countries look at the world in a different way. And that's going to drive them in different directions. And in some places, it's going to mean that they're going to conflict with each other. And in some places, we'll be able to cooperate. But, a kind of grand reset as some new bargain, it's going to take two parties. And sometimes I feel like when I see these things in the Turkish press, there's the assumption that the Turks will present their position and the Americans will accept it. I don't think that that's going to happen, especially given how connected President Erdogan seems to be to President Trump. I mean, I haven't heard it as much in Washington as I have heard it about Egypt or Saudi Arabia or the UAE or Israel, about the Democrats being angry about those countries' seemingly close connections to the president. But certainly you'd have to put President Erdogan in that category. And who's, been able to kind of work and try to corrupt the American system because he's a willing participant in Donald Trump. That, I think, should give Turks who are excited about a blank slate or a reset some pause. I'm not saying it won't happen. I'm saying it's going to be a little more difficult than I think what they imagine. One thing that strikes me, and one of the things that strikes me from that big article in the New York Times, is how either little Turkish officials and their supporters in the press understand about the American political system and how it's supposed to work, or they understand it but understood that President Trump and the people around him would be corruptible. Somehow I think it's
rule forever.
Right.
Probably, as long as Erdogan wishes to rule forever.
Right.
So there was a clash there, obviously. So yes, very specialist relationship indeed between Trump and Erdogan. And should Biden win, come out victorious, we can all bet that there will be more people talking and revealing some other things that they have been holding. So that will be a very interesting period.
Well, certainly if the Halkbank
journalists and think
investigation goes
tankers
forward,
like you.
if the Halkbank investigation goes forward, I think the Turks should be steel themselves for revelations of things that people. They may not be as spectacular as some people have speculated, but I think there's a real reason why this has been the top of the agenda for President Erdogan, for the foreign minister, for the President Erdogan's son-in-law, to try to make this go away, because it does seem that it will reveal things that President Erdogan does not want to be aired in public.
Stephen Cook, senior fellow with Council on Foreign Relations. Stephen, thank you for this great conversation and
wonderful to see you,
shedding light on the upcoming situation, especially between Turkey and United States after the elections.
And before we go, let me just say best wishes to all of my Turkish friends in Izmir, and hope that they are safe and that they get through this.
Okay. Thank you and see you again.
Take care. Thanks.